So sometimes I need to follow my own good advice and keep it simple instead of trying to do lots of fancy things. So I'm going to simplify painting a drop of water, and we'll go from there. Really, I'm going to try to keep it just as simple as possible. Make sure I got the right color going here, and I'm just going to kind of work in gray values so I can reuse this any number of places. I'm going to switch and pick, I would either adjust the brush I'm using a little bit, or I'm just going to pick something I want to use. And I'm just going to go down and pick my normal kind of go-to everyday brush. It's nothing super special about it. Just kind of what I'm used to using. And surprisingly enough, it is called Don's brush. So, looks like that. Small opacity is not very, it's full opacity. Interestingly enough, interesting color bit here. So I'm on a light tan background and painting with a mid-value gray, and I'll be darned, but that sure looks like blue to me, unless I turn off the background. So preamble, that is a little bit about simultaneous contrast, how one color can look completely different. Okay, to just start, and I am going to go ahead and start and use circular marquee, rectangular marquee, so I'm not going to worry too much about it either way. This is just going to make it a little bit easier to draw my initial outline, and I'm going to go a little bit actually into the brownish color, because I want to make sure that my values are working correctly. So pretty easy. Like I said, I'm going to be keeping this one simple. I'm going to go ahead and pick now the lighter part of the drop, which will be down here, because the light goes through and reflects off this. And let's blend them a little bit. So you drag this brush out. I am going to change the size setting on it a little bit. It's a little too pressure sensitive. So there's my value. As far as the size goes, I don't want it to be quite so small. So I'll make it up a little bit bigger here. So it's 65% of the minimum size when I start, and then it'll go up from there. I'll go ahead and leave that out. It's not really important right now. I'm going to pick this soft blend, or got it pulled off, soft blender, and I'm going to just blend these colors together. I'm going to go a little bit, the opacity a little bit higher, so I can get that blend a little quicker. And I could have painted it in with an airbrush, so that's not really important one way or the other. The bottom here, blending it, blend these two together. Usually I will rotate an image like this, and I zigzag through things, so it's kind of a back and forth, zigzag through, back and forth, until I get really kind of as much blending as I want. It is easier to lower the opacity as you're more and more into it, so you're not quite stirring everything around as much. I'm not going to worry too much about how beautiful this might look right now, because I'm just going to real quickly get it blended together and come back. And now I'll just go into switch here to digital airbrush and restate some of the light area down here, and I'm just letting up a little bit. And there are so many ways to do this, so I just decided to kind of go with this easier way, and I'll even blend a little bit of the interior. Okay, so there's a good start. Now what I'm going to do is take my big eraser, and I want this to be pretty soft, so I'm going to go with a pointed shape, and I'm going to start erasing out of the middle of this. So with this really pointed eraser, sometimes you need to turn on these kind of flat edges, because look, this is the size of it, but with the pointed one, it's only showing out to where it's painting about 50%. So make sure your size is kind of set with that profile, and then you can come in. And I'm just erasing out because I want to use this, use it bigger. I want to be able to use this on different backgrounds, so hence why this color, I'm erasing it out a little bit. You can see the background color coming through. I'm going to go ahead back, pick the digital airbrush again, and if I just get too much erased, I'll build a little bit back in. So it's kind of back and forth. Really, would be nice to just get it hit on the correct amount of color and that kind of stuff when you just start out. But if it doesn't quite work that way, that is the beauty. Just work it back and forth. A little bit lighter down on this really bottom edge. And back again to my eraser. A little bit bigger, I think. Let me see again. I'm going to have it just a little bit smaller. So opacity 20%. I'll probably use a little bit less as I go, just to make sure I'm not over using it. So here's basically finished drop with a nice inside. This is assuming the light's coming from above. However much bulge or roundness you want will determine mostly this dark edge here. And so this is pretty round. I'm going to go ahead and airbrush back in just a little more on that. Maybe I want it just a little bit more. Okay, and I'm going to save this selection. Because I'm going to use it in just a second here. So select, save selection, drop. Okay, and last thing I'm going to do, come in with a little touch and put in the highlight, which will be perpendicular to the kind of direction that I align these things with. So the highlight's going to be right here. This still probably looks just a little bit large to me, so I'm going to erase. I just want it kind of showing on the edge down low, like some light is refracting through. So that's pretty much as good as I'm going to need to go to get a complete drop. I'm not going to deselect this for just a second, so I'm going to load a new layer, and I'm going to create just a real quick shadow under this. So a new layer, I'll move it down, shadow, and this time I'm going to fill it with pretty neutral but pretty dark color. So get my fill tool, paint bucket tool. I'm on the right layer, the selection's active, and that's what I want it to do. So I'm going to go ahead and use a little more of the color I use for the drop itself. Again, this is supposed to be pretty neutral. So what I want to do now with that, I'm just going to deselect it. That layer is selected, and I'm going to drag it down to, let's create a bit longer shadow. So I'll do a Control T, and I'm going to lengthen this a little bit just to make it look inner, and I'm going to make it look just a little bit longer. And I'm going to rotate it just a little bit because this point needs to come a little more over perpendicular. You can just, I'll just move it off like that. That'll work now. Just trying to position it just like I want it to be. I do need to rotate a little bit, so Control T or Edit, Free Transform, and can pick the rotate here. I will move this pivot right under that drop, and see, I'm just trying to get the angle of these lines kind of the same as the angle there, maybe even a little more. Go ahead and hit enter. I'm going to widen it just a little bit, so free transform again, and that's looking pretty good. I think that will be fine. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to soften this so it looks a little bit more not quite as crisp. It could be just this crisp, so I'm only going to soften it a little bit, I guess. And effects, focus. Oh, let's see. Soften. And that's maybe an okay amount. So let's go ahead and click OK. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to reselect or load the selection I save. So select, load. And what this will do is when with this layer selected, the shadow, and I hit backspace, it gets rid of all of the shadow except what I want, the little bit that I want. There's a little bit of a ghost around the top of it here, so I will take my eraser, I'll raise the opacity some, and I'm just going to erase that. Just clean it up. So there is pretty much a drip, but if I had the light coming in here and refracting as a clear transparent drop, some of the shadow down here close to it would be a bit lighter. So back with my eraser, I'm going to lower the opacity, and so on the shadow layer, just going to lighten this toward transparency down here just slightly. And that feels a little heavy to me. So I'm going to duplicate this layer 2 and decide, do I like that a little bit more? Let me just go back to the basic top one. It's maybe okay. I think I probably do want to actually get some of the air dark back in here, just on the edge. So this is much simpler than I was trying to muck through last time, and it's working fine. So start off with this as the way to work, and then when you feel comfortable with it, then we'll expand on doing a couple of other things with it. So when I've got that like I like it, I'm going to go ahead and combine these layers. So select them both and merge drop the layers. So collapse the layers, So now I do have a drop that, you know, I can duplicate, move around, larger, smaller. I could actually duplicate that layer, and I can pull them off, and you can see it stays really pretty transparent, which is what you want. You'll never have your drops on top of each other, but in this one you can. I'm holding the control key, rotating it, and as long as I keep them kind of oriented with the light coming from the right side, you can play around with them, and they should look pretty good on any color. So the background, let's change the color of the background just to check if I'm telling the truth or telling a story. And I want to get kind of a mid-tone. So there, you know, they work even on this. You might want to tweak the colors a little bit. If I was to do that, select one of them, and I would go up under effects and tonal control and adjust colors. So it brings it up. I reset it to know what I'm starting with, and the hue shift, I can move that a little bit one way or the other, and see now I've got it looking a little bit more like a bluish. If I go the other way, I should be able to get to a green. So you can really only have to do one kind of drop, and you can use it multiple ways. Now that really doesn't look quite correct to me, but it might be a good starting point. So I'm just going to cancel it for a second, and what I mean by a starting point is I might go ahead and duplicate that layer. So right click my button and duplicate the layer. Now I might go with this bottom one and do the shifting the color. So just colors, and I want to make it a little more saturated and to bring out the green a bit. And that's mostly because I want it to affect this background well. Value wise, I can take it a little lighter or darker. That might be better, good. This is why digital is so versatile in a lot of ways. Click OK. I'm going to make this top one visible. I am going to lower its opacity just a bit. Nope, make sure you're on the right layer, Don. Lower the opacity just a bit. And I'm going to erase out of the bottom here. In fact, maybe I can just go with a multiply. Let's see what happens. Multiply. That maybe makes it too dark. Let's go down and see. I'm just going to keep it default. I think that'll work best for me. So there's the green one, and I'm just adding back in a little just of the dark. And I think that looks pretty good. Now, if I want this bottom area to be still more green, then I'll just come back in with the eraser and erase into the bottom here. And you can see it turns a bit more green. So pretty easy. There's how you do drop or drip, and I'll erase a little bit up here too. Adjust the colors, transform them, move them around, and that's really as much as I can think of the simplest method to make that happen right now. So the last one was way too complicated that I tried to show. This will work much easier.